LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 29th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing. This week I have the 13 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. For what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. I put the source of all the video clips down in the video description at links you can click on. Also, my clip list, the notes I keep for myself. I try to remember all the things I wanted to say. Usually I say like maybe half, 3/4 of the things I wanted to say, and not even everything that's on the clip list. The topic, well, there's one topic that's kind of in two parts. It's cleaning up Trump's mess. Most of it has to do with cleaning up the COVID mess, like in the thumbnail, where at 266,000 dead Americans. You'll see in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary I show in clip after next that the United States has 4% of the world's population, but 19% of the COVID deaths. Why is that? Well, is it Trump's mess? That's one of the things we'll discuss in terms of the COVID mess. And then the mess that Trump is making with his election disinformation. I have a couple Republicans at the end on that. I have Roy Blunt of Missouri totally backing off what he said 3 weeks ago in my live clip roundup, and I will compare a clip of what he said 3 weeks ago from what he said today about how much time we should give Trump to continue to undermine our elections. And then I'll have Asa Hutchinson, the governor of the neighboring state of Arkansas, who gives a much better answer. So I'll talk about all that when I get to the final few clips. But my political comedy comes from that second topic as well. There was a long interview that Trump did this morning with a very compliant Maria Bartiromo, Fox News business reporter. There's a link down in the video description. You can to the entire video on the Fox News website of the interview. It's like 45 minutes long. But I just thought that if I were to characterize this, what Trump was saying in this interview, I would say it was a massive dump of misinformation. And so that is why I thought this political comedy clip epitomized Trump's interview this morning over here.
The election, I was called by the biggest people saying, congratulations, political people. Congratulations, sir, you just won the election. It was 10 o'clock and you looked at the numbers, and I'm sure you felt that way. This election was over. And then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps in Michigan and Pennsylvania and all over. If you take a look at you just take a look at just about every state that we're talking about, every swing state that we're talking about, and they did these massive dumps of votes, and all of a sudden I went from winning by a lot to losing by a little. And in some cases, it took a period of time to do it. North Carolina, they couldn't do it. I won North Carolina. They couldn't. Somehow they had a better system, but they couldn't do anything. I believe they tried. We have affidavits, but.
And I mean, one of the scariest things about that interview is that Maria Bartiromo. I don't think she ever brought up coronavirus. The first person to bring it up about 54 minutes into the hour, because I said it was like a 45-minute interview, but it didn't start at the beginning of the program. So about 54 minutes into the program, it's like Trump brought up how the pandemic made it harder for him to win. So as you'll see in the news summaries I'm about to show you, Trump has put us in a really difficult position in terms of the coronavirus. We're doing a lot worse than a lot of the rest of the world. And Maria Bartiromo did not do a good job as a journalist. In fact, at some point she seemed to have like a PowerPoint ready to support Trump's claims of election fraud, even though the evidence, I mean, I think he's lost something like 39 of 40 cases, and the only case he won on was whether they could, I think it was the Pennsylvania legislature could decide to keep accepting mail-in ballots after Election Day, and the number of mail-in ballots, it wouldn't even change the outcome of the election. The one Casey won, I guess, or you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But now I'm going to get to my news summaries. I've started putting them from longest to shortest, and usually I like the NBC News Meet the Press one the best. I actually think ABC is a little bit better because of the focus on the economic impact, the food insecurity that COVID-19 is creating, the coronavirus crisis. But one of the things that's really interesting about these news summaries is how little they mention Trump. I mean, we're talking about Trump's mess, of course, that's the topic. But Trump himself gets very little mention. But I'll probably the most mention in the NBC News Meet the Press. Well, the right does, and how the right has made us anti-fact and anti-science, or how more on the right, which I think is true. Chuck Todd says. And anyway, I'll talk a little more about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary after we watch it together over here.
A good Sunday morning, and I hope you're having a safe and enjoyable Thanksgiving Day weekend. Throughout America's COVID crisis, there has been a parade of grim statistics. Among them, as of this morning, there have been more than 13.3 million cases and more than 266,000 deaths in the United States alone, with little reason to believe things will improve in the short run. But if there is one statistic that stands out above all the others, it is this one. The United States has 4% of the world's population and somehow has 19% of the world's COVID deaths. This is hardly what people mean by American exceptionalism. And no amount of gainsaying or presidential tweeting that increased testing is somehow to blame can wish away this dubious honor. This weekend, tens of millions ignored pleas from health experts and some government officials to avoid travel and instead spend time at home with their immediate families. The result may well be a COVID surge beyond the record numbers we've seen. How did we get here? Did we lose faith in our government because our government gave us reason to lose faith in it? Was it a decades-long assault on science and objective facts, particularly by some on the right? Was it a fractured media environment that invites people to seek alternative facts that fit their personal worldview? Or are we just fed up, done with months of Zoom meetings and closed stores and kids home from school, that we've simply had enough? Enough that millions feel it's worth taking a big risk to have a brief sense of normalcy. Whatever the cause, the results are clear. Millions are being infected. Hospitals are near their breaking point, and healthcare workers are the ones paying the price.
I've been a nurse for 20 years, and I've never experienced burnout like this.
On the front lines, healthcare workers are exhausted, overwhelmed, and at times angry at an American public that is only half listening.
I hope that the last moments of your life don't look like this. Because this is what you'll see at the end of your life if we don't start wearing masks.
We're understaffed. We have so much on our plates as nurses.
With coronavirus cases now over 13 million and continuing to climb, up in 44 states in the past 2 weeks, roughly 90,000 Americans are hospitalized. ICUs are overwhelmed.
It's not entirely clear to us that we're going to be able to move personnel from cool spots to hot spots, because the hot spots are everywhere.
According to federal data, by the end of the week, 22% of hospitals, nearly 1,400, expect to face a staffing shortage.
One of the plans in Utah is to open up one of our big event centers as a hospital. Well, where are the doctors coming from?
You can't just pick up medical professionals at the grocery store when you're in need of staff.
In a September survey, nearly 1 in 4 physicians said they know a physician who committed suicide. 58% expressed feelings of burnout. Healthcare workers are surrounded by dying patients.
And then we had to decide to take the action in a way. That was really hard. That was hard.
And healthcare workers are sacrificing their own lives.
So willing to put her life on the line to help others so that they could then help others. It was such a tragedy.
But while travel on Thanksgiving was down from previous years, more than 6 million people flew over the last week.
Are you concerned about the coronavirus everybody that's got it.
It doesn't seem like it's getting any better, so, I mean, we might as well just try to just have a little bit of fun.
Doctors, nurses, all healthcare frontliners are pretty frustrated and angry.
People say that COVID is a hoax, that masks don't work, that masks are politicized.
While some elected leaders are showing urgency, others continue to downplay the virus.
I think Oklahomans should be with their loved ones over Thanksgiving. Let's be safe about it.
In Denver, Mayor Michael Hancock urged residents to stay home.
I'm asking, I'm urging, I'm pleading with everyone, please stay home.
Then flew to Mississippi for Thanksgiving.
He told us we should not be seeing our family and should not be traveling for Thanksgiving, and then he goes behind our backs.
One of the things that we have been struggling with is what we do with our kids if we can't keep them safe. That includes potentially sending them to live with a relative away from us. So stay home, please.
In the 2 days since Thanksgiving, there have been 346,000 new confirmed COVID cases in the United States and 2,700 deaths. Of course, we won't know for a while how bad the surge of cases and deaths due to Thanksgiving weekend travel will be. Joining me now is Dr. Anthony Fauci.
And Anthony Fauci, I will have a couple Anthony Fauci clips, who's been all over, especially since the election. I guess they've released the Kraken. I know that's supposed to be the election misinformation thing, but I feel like watching the shows recently, and especially this week, Anthony Fauci was on multiple shows. Deborah Birx is back out there. They had Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General, has been released. So we have the doctors that those will be all the newsmakers in this first topic that I'm going to show you. No Jerome Adams, but I do have 2 Anthony Fauci clips and a Deborah Birx clip, all of which back up that really grim assessment. You'll hear Anthony Fauci say that we're going to have a surge on top of a surge, which, I mean, you saw some grim numbers there, but the one thing I liked about that, for people who say NBC News is too left-wing, they did point out one Democrat who had acted hypocritically, the mayor of Denver, who said stay home and then was seen going to Mississippi with his family. I've seen Fox News. That is like one of the main stories all week. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, went to this really high-end restaurant in Napa Valley called the French Laundry, with not wearing a mask, and it was supposed to be outside, but it was really kind of inside, and I saw that over and over and over again on Fox News. So I guess Meet the Press did its job of showing sort of the perspective from the other side. You can let me know if you think that's true from having watched that news summary. This news summary from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, with permanent co-host or whatever Martha Raddatz's title is. Martha Raddatz was hosting this week, and they did a news summary that like I said earlier, I think it might have been the best one, even though it's a little bit shorter. It has a lot of the same, the COVID impact I was talking about. Very little mention of Trump because he's fading away from our lives. We can only hope. But I think they did the best job of covering the economic effects and the food insecurity. There's also like an eviction crisis that's impending. There's all sorts of really nasty things in addition to all the people who are dying and are going to die. That anyway, sorry for the doom and gloom, but that's what is going to be all over this topic, including the news summary from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, hosted by Martha Raddatz, who, just like you saw from Chuck Todd, there is a focus in here on the costs to healthcare workers, but like I said, also economic impacts and food insecurity over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. The start to this holiday season so different for so many. Countless families spending Thanksgiving apart, but they are the lucky ones. At dinner tables across the country, more than 260,000 empty seats, while more than 90,000 Americans spent Thanksgiving in the hospital battling the virus. More than 4 million new cases this November, twice what it was in October, and the month is not over. Despite dire warnings advising against Thanksgiving gatherings, we also saw record-breaking travel. And today, we expect to break another record as millions of Americans are making their way home. This is just a snapshot of some of the nation's busiest airports this morning. But it is not just those lines at the airport that are causing fear. It is the images of these shocking lines across the country. Americans lined up for food. With a vaccine not widely available until next year, businesses remain shuttered, and more than 20 million people are claiming unemployment benefits. Dr. Anthony Fauci is standing by, but first, we wanted to take a closer look at this critical moment and those struggling in the long shadow of the pandemic.
We still have months of this battle ahead of us.
President-elect Joe Biden warning that the fight against COVID is far from over.
We have to try to slow the growth of this virus. We owe it to the doctors and the nurses and other frontline workers.
It's about 2:30 in the morning. I just got home from work.
Last March, when this all began, we talked to emergency room doctor Aaron Beaumont.
All of a sudden, we just got overwhelmed, ambulance after ambulance, with hypoxic patients, people in respiratory distress.
Dr. Beaumont, who works in the Boston area, has grown tragically used to the toll of this pandemic, but is bracing for a post-holiday crush of patients.
One of the constants that we've had throughout this pandemic since the beginning is the component of stress and fear that the healthcare workers and the frontline providers are experiencing every single day. We're tired of this. We're exhausted.
But the pandemic strains extend far beyond the halls of hospitals, months of economic hardship marking the start of the holiday season. That need evident across the country, cars backed up for miles, people standing in line for hours, even in the rain, just to get food.
You know, I'm a single parent, just trying to provide for my family right now. I'm not working.
Hunger in this country at a new high. 1 out of every 8 Americans say they sometimes don't have enough food to eat. For households with children, it's 1 in 6.
I've never witnessed the system being more strained than it is right now.
Edna Pagnon turned to the Arlington Food Assistance Center after health concerns forced her to leave her job as a grocery store cashier.
We get food once a week, yes. And it's a big help for us. We already got the turkey.
So you'll have a Thanksgiving?
Oh, yes.
Because of this place?
Yes, because of this one, yeah.
Just miles from my own home in Virginia, long lines here where they've seen a 45% increase in the families coming for food. Executive Director Charlie Meng worries it could get worse.
It can get very difficult at times watching these lines getting longer and longer.
What do you expect in the coming months?
When county support, federal support drops off, our families will come to us in even greater numbers. And that's my biggest fear. And, we have to serve all of those people. We are committed to serving everybody who comes to our doors.
It's just one of the many monumental hurdles facing the president-elect as he inherits the responsibility of a nation reeling from the pandemic.
Hang on. Don't let yourself surrender to the fatigue, which I understand it is real fatigue. I know we can and we will beat this virus.
And joining me now live is the director of...
So, yeah, joining her live there is Anthony Fauci, and I have that Anthony Fauci clip coming up. But I said some things about that ABC News summary before I showed it, about how they focused on the economic impact, the food insecurity, the hunger. One of the other things I see in my notes here is that I like the way they use multiple Biden clips. I've been talking about how the news summaries are fading away, our focus on Trump, and you saw, I think there was more Biden than Trump in that ABC News summary. And I think that ABC News summary may have some of the scariest curves. First, the cases curve has been crazy. Wait, hold on. Let me see if I can... Got my... Here. sorry, that's the hospitalization curve that's looks bad. That's a very scary curve. I mean, a lot of these news summaries have scary curves, but I thought ABC had the scariest curves. Hospitalizations are scariest because, well, for a couple reasons. First, you know, you can't say more testing, more cases when it comes to hospitalizations and deaths. More testing doesn't get you more hospitalizations, doesn't get you more deaths, and that's where we're going. Oh, and then even the more cases, though. Here, let me get the more cases here. Because that's just even steeper. And you'll see Fauci earlier. You remember I used in the last, I think last week, Fauci was doing, we could do this, or we don't want to do this. And this week, we're doing this, and that's all he does. We're doing this. It's the scariest of, this is the number of cases here. I mean, that's pretty damn scary, right? If you look at talk about your third wave. Here, let me make it so I can talk while I show it to you. Let's see. Yeah, see here? You've got like March through May, and then is like your first wave, if it is, and then May, like after July, after Memorial Day, because I'll be talking about this later, you get your second wave. And then where we are now is like way beyond any of that in terms of cases. It's not really a first, second, and third wave. It's just like, I don't even know what to call it, but it's all the whole part of the same pandemic, and it's not looking good. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about the ABC News Summary. CBS News Face the Nation had a pretty good news summary. I've talked about how they've had the best COVID coverage from the beginning. They were the only of the big 5 corporate outlets to cover it on their Sunday morning news analysis show in January and February. When I say this all the time, like pretty much every week, that when CBS was doing that in January and February, I was saying they're either overhyping the threat from this virus, or they're the only network covering the biggest story of the year, and turned out to be number two. I like to say that every week, and even sometimes I refer to CBS as the COVID or coronavirus broadcasting system. But this week, everyone focused on COVID, and I'm not sure that CBS, Margaret, Brennan, and then Mark Strassman reporting from Atlanta had the best of the news summaries. I mean, they focused on COVID, and I don't know why they spent so much time on the effect COVID is having on the NFL. Is that really newsworthy? Anyway, you can let me know what you think after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The phrase that's been running through our minds here is the darkest hour is just before the dawn. The English theologian and historian Thomas Fuller is credited with coming up with it in 1650, but it feels pretty appropriate as we move into winter and 2021. In the month of November, which isn't even over yet, we've recorded 4 million new cases. That's more than double the number of October infections. We begin this morning with CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
COVID's community spread had a busy Thanksgiving. The virus had a chance to catch up with lots of family in jammed airports and in stores with Black Friday deep discounts. Red tags, red flags. At current rates, roughly 114 more Americans test positive every minute. 65 more Americans die from COVID every hour. And America could start to see 3,000 COVID deaths a day, more than died on September 11th. COVID has also blitzed the NFL from coast to coast. Tougher new restrictions in California's Santa Clara County leave the 49ers without a place to play or practice for the next 3 weeks. The Denver Broncos need to find a quarterback today. All 4 on their roster are now in quarantine. And 18 Baltimore Ravens tested positive this week. In the overwhelmed Midwest, the epidemic's showing signs of peaking. Not in South Dakota, where at least 30% of residents have been infected. 43% of people tested here this week tested positive. But for many, mask mandates remain even less popular than the virus.
This is cowboy country, man, and you try and tell someone to do something and they want to do the opposite.
Outrage in West Virginia. Masks now a must in all indoor public spaces.
I had many people that were calling and they were saying to me over and over and over, we want to be like South Dakota. We want to be South Dakota. Well, I don't want to be South Dakota.
I'm pleading.
Hypocrisy grabbed the Thanksgiving spotlight in Denver. Mayor Michael Hancock urged residents to stay home. An hour later, he was spotted boarding a flight with his family to Mississippi. But the way millions more Americans gave thanks this year, they should get them in return. They celebrated the holiday and each other by staying apart. As one Chicago health official put it, better to have a Zoom Thanksgiving than an ICU Christmas. Thanksgiving travel is weighed down this year, but at airports like Atlanta's, the COVID risk will grab the spotlight again today. Last year, the Sunday after Thanksgiving was the busiest day in TSA history. Margaret?
Mark, thank you. According to the White House Coronavirus Task Force, there are now 48 states plus the District of Columbia now in the red zone. Just Maine and Hawaii are not. I want to go now to the coordinator of that task force, Dr.
And I do have Dr. Deborah Birx, and you saw she's wearing a mask of all the, I said Deborah Birx, Anthony Fauci, Jerome Adams, and Admiral Giroux, the other, or Giroux, I can never pronounce his name, but like all these members of the task force were on the news shows this morning. Deborah Birx was the only one to do the entire interview wearing her mask, so I don't know, I think she feels guilty about something, maybe, I don't know, or more, or maybe she just, maybe we should all be wearing masks all the time if we're talking to the public in any way, just to drill in the message that we can save lives at this point by wearing masks. You know, I did a live stream back in March where I started off the show wearing a mask, and then I took it off and said, no, all the experts are saying masks don't really protect us. I even got a comment this last couple days from someone saying that was like misinformation, but actually that's what people were saying back then. Even Anthony Fauci, and there are even clips when I did that back in March that I used that showed that when we didn't know about asymptomatic spreaders of the disease, and when the disease wasn't so prevalent, the mask actually stops people from spreading the disease, and if there aren't a lot of people with the disease, anyway, the whole mask wearing thing was more controversial back in March and April, but not controversial now, and maybe that's why Deborah Birx is trying to just wear the mask through the entire interview. But the next two news summaries I want to... Oh, and did you see how CBS also went after the mayor of Denver? Mayor of Denver is screwed. I guess politicians shouldn't be hypocrites. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And also, before I move on to the Fox News Sunday news summaries, I wanted to acknowledge a few Super Chat contributions I've gotten so far. Let me see if I can change the audio source on this clip so that I can talk during it. Can you hear me? Yes. So thank you to Matthew and Lulu Girl and Grizzy Bear for the Super Chat contributions, which actually give me more revenue than the ad revenue I get from YouTube. That's one of the, my videos are usually demonetized. I don't know how many of you actually see ads before you watch the video, but they pretty much get demonetized for almost the entire time that they get views. So I get almost no ad revenue from YouTube anymore. It's pretty much all my Super Chat contributors, my patrons on Patreon. There's a link down in the video description to become a patron on Patreon. There's a join button down below the video where you can click and become a monthly member. I've talked sometimes about how after President-elect Biden gets sworn in on January 20th, I'm going to do one more live stream on January 24th and then reassess based on my revenues as to whether I should spend every Sunday like I have for the last 396 or 97 Sundays doing this show for you every week. So I appreciate those contributions. I know some of you do kind of a drinking game when I do this show. You drink when I mess up the clips. Well, there were actually a couple things that messed up on the Sunday morning news analysis shows this week, including on Fox News Sunday, at least in the original broadcast. So I actually have the Fox News Sunday news summary in two parts. First, the original broadcast where there was this weird hiccup in Jacqui Heinrich's pre-packaged report. So instead they threw it back to her and she kind of ad-libbed it, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. This holiday weekend, the coronavirus continues to ravage American families, with experts raising concerns that testing disruptions over Thanksgiving will give people the false impression the spread has slowed. Meanwhile, promising news of vaccine development raises the question, who should get it first? In a moment, we'll speak with U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams. But first, let's get the latest on the Biden transition from Jacqui Heinrich in Wilmington, Delaware. Jacqui?
Good morning, Bret. Foregoing Thanksgiving on Nantucket, President-elect Joe Biden opted for a scaled-down dinner in Delaware, urging Americans to keep making sacrifices as work continues battling the virus.
We might not be able to join our hands around a table with our loved ones. We can come together as a nation.
Transition 46 is at work this holiday weekend.
We might not be able to join our hands around a table with our loved ones. We can come together as a nation.
Transition 46 is at work this holiday weekend, announcing 3 new advisors to the coronavirus task.
We might not be able to join our hands around a table with our loved ones. We can come together as a nation.
Transition 46 is at work this holiday weekend, announcing 3 new... We apologize for that technical error, Bret. Congress is bracing for Biden's national coronavirus strategy. Republicans have largely resisted more big spending, but both parties agree that more funding is needed, especially as Pfizer's vaccine sits on the verge of approval, and United Airlines is already positioning charter flights to get it ready for quick distribution. Bret.
All right, Jacqui, thank you. Joining us now, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome.
So yeah, that was the messed up original Fox News Sunday broadcast, and I guess Jacqui Heinrich did an okay job of summarizing what she was supposed to say. It's kind of like the other news summaries in that it concentrates on the coronavirus, downplays Trump completely. It's kind of interesting because if you've been watching the Fox News Sunday news summaries over several months before the election with me, you know that they would have Jacqui Heinrich talking, reporting from the Biden campaign, and then there'd be this whole different universe reporting, like David Spunt, or sometimes Peter Doocy would report. Peter Doocy reported from the Biden campaign, but they'd have someone else report from the White House, and it would be like 2 different universes, different facts, and it would take a long time before they even mentioned COVID-19 on Fox News. Anyway, if you're wondering what was supposed to happen in that pre-recorded package, that was the 8 a.m. Pacific version. Then I rewatched Fox News Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, and they fixed that glitch so that you can actually see what Jacqui Heinrich was supposed to say in the Fox News Sunday news summary I've recorded for you over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. This holiday weekend, the coronavirus continues to ravage American families, with experts raising concerns that testing disruptions over Thanksgiving will give people the false impression the spread has slowed. Meanwhile, promising news of vaccine development raises the question, who should get it first? In a moment, we'll speak with U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams. But first, let's get the latest on the Biden transition from Jacqui Heinrich in Wilmington, Delaware. Jacqui?
Good morning, Bret. Foregoing Thanksgiving on Nantucket, President-elect Joe Biden opted for a scaled-down dinner in Delaware, urging Americans to keep making sacrifices as work continues battling the virus.
We might not be able to join our hands around a table with our loved ones, but we can come together as a nation.
Transition 46 is at work this holiday weekend, announcing 3 new advisors to the coronavirus task force. The picks reflect the president-elect's priorities, officials with experience who will address inequities.
It's a team.
It's a formula Biden's kept with nominees so far.
Experience and leadership, fresh thinking and perspective.
It's expected to continue this week, filling economic posts. Janet Yellen's poised to become the first woman to head up the Treasury. Equally historic contenders Michelle Flournoy and Jay Johnson are up for Secretary of Defense. But Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are also calling for inclusion in a letter to Biden. Record Asian American turnout helped Georgia turn blue, and the state's Senate runoffs loom ahead. President Trump will campaign for the GOP incumbents next weekend, and Biden's legislative agenda is in the crosshairs.
Joining us now, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams. Dr. Adams, thanks for being here.
So you can see that was what Jacqui Heinrich in the previous clip summarized. There was actually some different stuff in there than what she said, so, but whatever, she had to ad-lib on the spot. You can't really falter for that, but it's kind of weird how they spliced it in there, and that's why there was, in the rebroadcast later, there was no like handoff from Bret Baier or from Jacqui Heinrich back to Bret Baier, but I guess that's live television. We'll do it live. Isn't that what Bill O'Reilly said? Anyway, Bill O'Reilly said, we'll do it live. And I have one more news summary to show you before I get to 2 Anthony Fauci's and a Deborah Birx clip, and then 2 Roy Blunts and a Asa Hutchinson clip for to finish up the COVID-19 mess that we have to clean up from Trump, and then the electoral disinformation mess we have to clean up from President Trump. So this is the final news summary. We're prepping for the worst because of the devastation of COVID-19, and also Trump is not going to concede the election, all in the shortest of the news summaries from CNN, State of the Union. Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper this morning. Over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is preparing for the worst. As Americans finish an unusual Thanksgiving weekend, the nation is heading into what is expected to be a devastating month for the pandemic. Already, 4 million new U.S. COVID cases and more than 34,000 deaths this month alone. And we haven't even begun to see the effect of Thanksgiving travel, dinners, or Black Friday shopping. One infectious disease expert is now warning that the post-holiday case surge will be destabilizing for the U.S. healthcare system, the economy, and homeland security, with some projections of deaths will double before vaccines are able and be available to people to give some really much needed relief. As President-elect Biden prepares to take office amidst this crisis, President Trump is finally showing some signs. He knows he lost, telling reporters Thursday that he will leave this White House if the Electoral College votes for President-elect Joe Biden on December 14th. But he he is still spreading dangerous and fraudulent claims about the election. Okay, I want to go now to Admiral Bret, who, of course, is in charge.
So, like I said, no Admiral Bret clip. Giroir, is that how you pronounce it? But you saw there, Dana Bash also had some weird technical problem where there was like a couple weird beats after her introduction before she said, okay, we're going to go to Admiral Bret Giroir. Maybe she was trying to think of how you pronounce the name Giroir. But I don't know, maybe, is it just me or can nobody pronounce that name? I'm really bad at pronouncing names, so I have to admit that up front. I've talked about that in the past. I don't want to go off on that whole tangent, but I do want to go on to and the one other thing about that CNN State of the Union news summary, I watch all these clips 3 times, basically. First, when I watch the news shows. The second time is when I capture the clips. And then the third time is when I play them and watch them with my live viewers here. And I said sometimes the longest news summaries are the best, and I also have said I think ABC did a good job of talking about the economic impact better than any of the news summaries, but actually CNN pretty much covered all the important points in the shortest of the summaries, which that actually, compacting it all down into the shortest, 1 minute 22 second clip that I just showed you. I guess that deserves some kudos as well. But anyway, you can let me know what you think about the 5 different news summaries. Well, I showed you 6 because of the screw up on the Fox News Sunday one, but the 5 different corporate news outlets and how they summarize the news of the week on their flagship Sunday morning news analysis shows. But now I have 3 newsmaker clips on the COVID crisis, that is the Trump mess we have to clean up, 2 Anthony Fauci's and a Deborah Birx, and then I have 3 clips on the election disinformation Trump mess we have to clean up. That's 2 Roy Blunts and an Asa Hutchinson. Those are the last 6 clips. First, the 3 clips to finish up this topic. This is 5.5 minutes of Anthony Fauci on NBC News' Meet the Press. You saw a lot of grim statistics. You saw how things were getting really bad. It may be peaking before Thanksgiving. Although, who was the only one who mentioned that... I'm looking at my notes here. I know I put this in my notes somewhere. Somebody mentioned that, I think it might have been Fox News Sunday. Oh yeah, it was Fox News Sunday was the only one who mentioned that because some of the people who keep the records take Thanksgiving off, there might be sort of a false drop in cases and hospitalizations and deaths in the next few days that will go give people a false sense of security. But what's really going to happen is there's going to be a surge on top of a surge. Why is that? Because people didn't fucking listen. They didn't fucking listen on Thanksgiving. So many people traveled. So many people gathered. COVID fatigue, I don't know. But you'll see Anthony Fauci in this next clip. I talked about this earlier, how 2 weeks ago, he was saying how the curve could go do. Well, this week he's just, we're here. It's like this steep exponential curve, and it's going to be a surge on top of a surge. And in the first answer, he tries to be optimistic and says, it might not be too late, but I think if you listen till the end of this clip, it sounds pretty much like it's too late. It's too late to stop a lot of really bad things from happening, as I will talk about with you after we watch Anthony Fauci talking to Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press this morning over here.
I think this other statistic tells the story of November pretty well. The total number of coronavirus cases in the United States for November surpassed 4 million on Saturday. That's double, more than double what we saw in October. What are we staring at in December, considering, I guess, Halloween was part of this early surge in November? What should we expect in December, sir?
Well, if you look at the slope of that curve that led to the numbers that you just mentioned, Chuck, we're going to be seeing, as we go towards the end now and getting into December, we're seeing the surge with an inflection curve like this. The concern we had as we entered into the Thanksgiving holiday and as we're now coming out of the Thanksgiving holiday is that the travel and the people congregating at dinners that you'd expect, we try to get the word out for people, as difficult as it is to really not have large gatherings of people, family and friends, but try to keep it confined to the immediate household. But you know, people are not always going to do that. So what we expect, unfortunately, as we go for the next couple of weeks into December, that we might see a surge superimposed upon that surge that we're already in. And, you know, and when I give that message, I don't want to frighten people, except to say, it is not too late at all for us to do something about this, because as we travel back, to be careful when we go back to where we are, to just continue to do the things that we've been talking about. An important issue, Chuck, is that we know when you mitigate with masks, with distance, with not having crowds or congregate settings, that those states that have done that, you could actually see that the inflection of their curve starts to do this. So we know we can do something about it, particularly now as we get into the colder season and as we approach the Christmas holidays.
Look, it took what was it? I think it was only about a week before Thanksgiving that the CDC came out and advised against travel. Are we going to see more dire warnings given about travel now, essentially now, in the next week or two, as we prepare for the end of the year holidays and New Year's?
You know, Chuck, I'd have to say honestly, unless something changes dramatically, which I don't see that happening, because the curves, when you look at the dynamics of an outbreak, that you see usually a 3, 4, 5 week period of time before curves start really coming down. So I think we're going to be faced with another situation. We're going to have to make decisions as a nation, state, city, and family, that we're in a very difficult time, and we're going to have to do the kinds of restrictions of things we would like to have done, particularly in this holiday season, because we're entering into what's really a precarious situation, because we're in the middle of a steep slope. You know, when I tell what people need to do, we say it over and over again. We know it works, but also that there is, as I mentioned to you before, Chuck, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because we will really be seeing vaccines soon. We likely, almost certainly, are going to be vaccinating a portion of the individuals in the first priority before the end of December. And then as we get into January and February and March, more and more. So if we can hang together as a country and do these kinds of things to blunt these surges until we get a substantial proportion of the population vaccinated, we can get through this. There really is light at the end of the tunnel.
What is your confidence level that various hospital systems are going to hold up right now? I mean, look, the warnings are coming from all over the country. I know you guys see these reports on the task force. I saw one earlier this week. It was something like 1 in 5 healthcare systems around the country were on the brink. They were already over capacity. The next 2 weeks could make it worse. Healthcare workers themselves, there are not enough of them. Are you concerned about failing systems around the country?
You know, Chuck, I have to say that I am, and I am because reality stares you right in the face. Just last night, I got a couple of calls from colleagues and associates who were very much involved in different states throughout the country saying, we're at that point where we soon, if things don't turn around quickly, we're going to have a situation with capacity, not only of hospital capacity, but staff. You know, what do you think we should do? I mean, almost pleading for advice about, you know, what can we do? We don't want to lock down completely, but we might have to if this, and I'm talking locally, I'm not talking about nationally. I'm talking about individual locations of people starting to see significant stresses on the hospital and healthcare delivery system. So again, that's such an even more important reason why we've got to realize that we do have within our capability to be able to blunt that by doing the simple things that we talk about short of locking down, so we don't precipitate the necessity of locking down.
Well, that was pretty damn grim. Not only, like I said before, I showed the clip in terms of the surge upon the surge and all the bad behavior during the Thanksgiving, but you also heard at the end there that Dr. Fauci was talking about how we're on the brink of our hospital system failing. You know, there are a lot of hospitals in multiple hot spots around the country that are getting close to capacity. No more elective surgeries. It's like they're all full up with COVID patients and emergencies. So anymore, and you know, you can expand the facilities. You know, you can set up like makeshift hospitals, but if you don't have the people to staff it, you're still screwed. And you know, back in when we were at the beginning of this curve, you know, the cases, if back in like May and July and, you know, the previous humps there of this nasty curve, they were localized mostly in like New York, New Jersey, Louisiana. There were a few other places. And so you could like rush personnel, nurses, doctors to those areas, but not this time. Doesn't matter how many like makeshift hospitals you set up if you don't have the staff to give care to the patients, which is where we're at. That's why we're at the brink of systems failure, as Anthony Fauci said there. So that's why that's particularly grim. I don't know. Maybe I should tell some sort of funny story to uplift us between the Anthony Fauci clips. Well, I was looking at the Super Chat contributions and I saw two here. Let me see if I can change this so that I can talk while I show this. Here we go. So, Sexy Bob and DJ Oaks Monroe gave me these two Super Chat contributions. Sexy Bob said, "Taking sardines out of my cat's mouths, but here you go." And then DJ Oaks Monroe from Canada said, "Luta continua." And as best I can tell, that's Portuguese for "the fight goes on." And I used to eat sardines because of some Portuguese people. I dropped out of college for a couple of years and worked as a pizza delivery driver in a couple different places. And one of the places was this place called Laval's Pizza in Berkeley, California, that was run or managed by a bunch of Portuguese guys. And for some reason, they loved to put sardines on pizza, and they would give those pizzas for free to the drivers. So I ate that a lot of the time when I was a poor pizza delivery driver. And the funny part about that story, one of the things I always remember about that is that people would call in, and these Portuguese guys would answer the phone, and people would think they spoke Spanish, and they tried to talk to them in Spanish. And the one thing I remember hearing over and over again working that job was hearing those guys saying, I don't speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese, or whatever. Anyway, I'm not really good at accents, but anyway, that is my comic relief moment based on those super chat contributions that I definitely appreciate from Sexy Bob and DJ Oaks Monroe about Sexy Bob talking about the sardines, and DJ Oaks Monroe giving me a fight goes on in Portuguese if I'm if Google translated that correctly for me while I was watching that last clip with you. And then I have one more Anthony Fauci clip for you. This is talking about whether we should close down the schools. That's something that's been controversial. That's a definite left-right issue. And Anthony Fauci talks about his, does he call it a meme or a talking point? Or it's just like, this was another clip that got a lot of play from the Sunday morning news analysis shows where Anthony Fauci said, keep the schools open by closing down the bars, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
And Dr. Fauci, New York City public schools shut down again earlier this month. I know your default position is that you'd like to see the schools open, but how do you make that happen? And how would you advise the incoming Biden administration on getting a sort of unified response?
Well, Martha, that's a good question. We get asked it all the time. We say it not being facetiously as a soundbite or anything, but, close the bars and keep the schools open is what we really say. Obviously, you don't have one size fits all, but as I said in the past, and as you accurately quoted me, the default position should be to try as best as possible within reason to keep the children in school or to get them back to school. The best way to ensure the safety of the children in school is to get the community level of spread low. So if you mitigate the things that you know are causing spread in a very, very profound way, in a robust way, if you bring that down, you will then indirectly and ultimately protect the children in the school, because the community level is determined how things go across the board. So my feeling would be the same thing. If you look at the data, the spread among children and from children is not really very big at all, not like one would have suspected. So let's try to get the kids back, but let's try to mitigate the things that maintain and just push the kind of community spread that we're trying to avoid. And those are the things that you know well. The bars, the restaurants where you have capacity seating indoors without masks. Those are the things that drive the community spread, not the schools.
And Dr. Fauci, you talked about the vaccine.
And if you want to hear Dr. Fauci talk about the vaccine, you can click on the link in the video description for the rest of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, hosted by Martha Raddatz there. But I think that's true that if we had, and the other thing that Anthony Fauci talks about a lot in clips I didn't take is how he wishes we had a test, a cheap test that people could use at home and then throw away, that would let them know that they could use over and over again, and we could use in our schools, that we need basically billions of these throwaway tests, so that, because we have 330 million people, and if people want to test themselves like once every couple months, that's already a billion tests, right? But anyway, that's the part I didn't take from Anthony Fauci. But the final member of the coronavirus task force, who the final Unleash the Kraken member, Anthony Fauci has been reined in for before the election, and now he's out on the shows for weeks, and he was on multiple shows. And like I said, Deborah Birx has finally shown up again, but just wearing a mask. I don't know, does she feel guilty? It almost seems like, I don't know why it keeps me thinking about Cersei on Game of Thrones, the like shame, shame, shame. But I guess she was naked when she did her walk of shame, and Deborah Birx feels like she has to completely wear the mask talking to Margaret Brennan about the surge on top of the surge thing that you saw Anthony Fauci say on NBC News's Meet the Press in the clip before last. And I'll talk more about that with you after we watch that clip together over here.
The numbers are pretty staggering. I know we crossed at least twice this week a daily death count over 2,000. It's the first time we've seen that during this pandemic. Dr. Fauci said this morning we're seeing a surge on top of a surge. What do Americans need to be prepared for?
I think what worries Dr. Fauci and I the most is and I loved your opening where you talked about several waves and this being the third wave. If you look at the second wave, going into the Memorial Day weekend, we had less than 25,000 cases a day. We had only 30,000 inpatients in the hospital. And we had way less mortality, way under 1,000. We're entering this post-Thanksgiving surge with 3, 4, and 10 times as much disease across the country. And so that's what worries us the most. We saw what happened post-Memorial Day. Now we are deeply worried about what could happen post-Thanksgiving because the number of cases, 25,000 versus 180,000 a day. That's why we are deeply concerned. And as you described, it looked like things were starting to improve in our northern plains states. And now with Thanksgiving, we're worried that all of that will be reversed.
What capacity is there to backstop overwhelmed hospitals?
Well, so that is obviously all of our concerns. And that's why we're really asking states and mayors to really test for impact and consider vaccinating for impact. We know who's at highest risk, making sure that all of those individuals are tested. We know people may have made mistakes over the Thanksgiving time period. So if you're young and you gathered, you need to be tested about 5 to 10 days later, but you need to assume that you're infected and not go near your grandparents and aunts and others without a mask. We're really asking families to even mask indoors if they chose to gather during Thanksgiving and others went across the country or even into the next state. And if you're over 65 or you have comorbidities and you gathered at Thanksgiving, if you develop any symptoms, you need to be tested immediately because we know that our therapeutics work best, both our antivirals and our monoclonal antibodies work best very early in disease. So we're really asking governors and mayors to make testing more available so we can prevent people having to be hospitalized. But obviously, we're deeply worried. We're over 90,000 inpatients right now. If we have a surge 2 weeks on top of that, even when we're starting to see some improvement, I appreciate that you have Mayor from Detroit on. They're really, all these mayors are working to decrease their number of cases and getting to a plateau. And now we could have a fourth surge.
So yeah, fourth surge, third wave, just all part of the same Trump mess shit show that we're all dealing with. That's why we have 4% of the world's population, but 19% of the world's COVID-19 deaths. And if you do that calculation 3 months from now, it's not getting any better. I mean, there are some areas of the world that are not, Brazil's not doing that great. India's not doing that great. Europe is on lockdown, and there was actually, if you go to the link in the video description to CBS News Face the Nation, they had a report on Europe. Not Elizabeth Palmer. It was Elizabeth Palmer saying that their lockdowns have actually had some success on getting their outbreaks under control. I don't know, I guess in a few months we'll see who did the best. Brazil has done not that great. India is having problems. Russia, and of course the United States under Donald Trump as, big loser. the big COVID-19 loser. It's hard to say, but that is one of the big messes that Donald Trump is leaving for the president-elect Joe Biden, which is my next topic here. The other mess that our president is creating is his refusal to accept the results of the election. And my next 3 newsmaker clips are on that topic. First, here is Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union, giving an introduction about how the election has, the key states have finished their recanvass and have decided that Biden won and Trump lost. The GSA, is it General Services or Government Services? I think it's General Services Administration. Emily Murphy finally ascertained that it's most likely Biden is going to be president, and so he gets the transition money. And anyway, here's Dana Bash talking about that, and then asking Missouri Senator Roy Blunt if he's willing to say Biden is the president. And I have some criticism of her cross-examination using a clip from a few weeks ago. I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Dana Bash. It's been more than 3 weeks now since the election was called for Joe Biden, and President Trump still hasn't acknowledged that he lost. Even though the Biden transition is well underway officially now, cash and formal communication, it's all happening with Trump officials. Still, not many Republicans have challenged the president on his baseless claims. Well, joining me now exclusively is a member of the GOP leadership, Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, who also chairs the Senate Rules Committee, which oversees the election. Senator, thank you so much for joining me this morning. A growing number of your Senate Republican colleagues are now acknowledging that Joe Biden won the election. Do you accept the fact that Joe Biden is the president-elect?
Oh, sorry. There's one thing I really wanted to point out. I want to point out to you before I show you this clip, especially people who are engaging in a drinking game. The drinking game word is process. Process. I can't believe how many times Roy Blunt says the word process here, which is just a total worthless, nothing word. But sorry, I forgot to mention that. Let's start the clip over again and talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Dana Bash. It's been more than 3 weeks now since the election was called for Joe Biden, and President Trump still hasn't acknowledged that he lost. Even though the Biden transition is well underway officially now, cash and formal communication, it's all happening with Trump officials. Still, not many Republicans have challenged the president on his baseless claims. Well, joining me now exclusively is a member of the GOP leadership, Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, who also chairs the Senate Rules Committee, which oversees the election. Senator, thank you so much for joining me this morning. A growing number of your Senate Republican colleagues are now acknowledging that Joe Biden won the election. Do you accept the fact that Joe Biden is the president-elect of the United States?
Well, we're certainly moving forward as if that's what's going to happen on January the 20th. The transition money, which really is a relatively new thing in American government, that the elected president would have to have government money to make their transition. That's available. The Rules Committee that I chair issued the regulations a few days ago so that Senate employees who wanted to be part of what are called the landing teams in the various agencies have a legal structure now to where they can go and be at those agencies between now and January the 20th if the Biden the Biden organization wants them to do that. But, you know, the president wants to see this process play out. The president-elect technically has to be elected president by the electors. That happens in the middle of December. And then January the 6th, I'm one of the 4 members of the Congress that participates in the joint session that decides if those electoral votes are fully accepted. And of course, that's when this process is over, when those votes are accepted and counted. But we're working with the Biden administration, likely administration, on both the transition and the inauguration as if we're moving forward.
Likely administration. So is it safe to say that you do consider Joe Biden the president-elect?
Well, the president-elect will be the president-elect when the electors vote for him. There is no official job president-elect. Part of the problem we've had between the media and the Congress, particularly Republicans in the Congress, the last 4 years, is there's always this straw man that is set up. And I think I'm on a list of that you're keeping at your network of Republican senators who haven't yet acknowledged that there's a president-elect, as if that's a significant thing.
Well,
it's just a constant fight
about
things. What matters is we're going through the process to allow this process to work its way to Inauguration Day.
I hear you, but the issue, Senator, forgive me, but the issue, Senator, is that it's not just a title. It's that the current president has lost, and his allies have lost or withdrawn more than 30 lawsuits since Election Day. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia have certified the votes. And maybe even more importantly, the president is undermining the democratic process by talking about fraud that nobody can find, even judges who look at cases that come before them say is not happening. So that is why that this is an issue. Do you? Well, and I guess the question.
We're at about the end of that. We're at about the end of that process, and when states have certified, when this process is over, that's when you come to a conclusion. That's why these things are set up in that way. So you go back and you officially look at the ballots. Georgia hand counted every ballot. Now, there may have been ballots that shouldn't have been cast, but the ballots that were counted, in my view, were counted properly. Georgia transitioned to a paper ballot backup system from what they had 4 years ago.
I understand that. Let me ask you this way, this approach. You were the Secretary of State in Missouri. Have you seen evidence of widespread voter fraud? You know how this.
And the answer is no. He hasn't seen evidence of widespread voter fraud. But if you want to get the honest version of that last clip, I mentioned the drinking game thing where drink every time he says process. No. Replace the word process with bullshit. Every time he says process, think bullshit, and that clip will make a lot more sense, especially because now he's saying January 6th. That's when Biden becomes president-elect, which is some new category we've created, like in every election that we've all lived through for, I don't even want to tell you how many elections I remember, but I honestly can remember the 1972 Nixon versus McGovern election. I think I had a confession I made about that months ago on my Sunday live clip roundup about tearing down McGovern posters. Didn't I mention that? Because I was a very young person, and anyway, don't want to go off on the whole 1972 election tangent, but I'm just saying that Roy Blunt is missing the fact that all of our elections, other than 2000, when the networks called the election, and then we had to wait to see what happened with all the court battles that were over one state and 537 votes. But that's not what's happening now. It's like 5 states, and like Georgia is closest with like 12 or 13,000 votes, and Pennsylvania is like 60. Like Biden has won in greater numbers in the Democratic blue wall. In the next clip I'm going to show you, you'll see Roy Blunt call it a speed bump, the Democratic blue wall in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But this is from November 8th, 3 weeks ago, and that's my one criticism of Dana Bash in that last clip. She did a good job of confronting Roy Blunt with the facts, but she should have showed Roy Blunt some of what he said 3 weeks ago, talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I showed this in my LiberalViewer live stream or live clip roundup 394. 3 weeks ago. This week is 397. But November 8th, this is 5 days after the November 3rd election, and you'll see Roy Blunt say, well, it takes 7 to 10 days for the important states to certify, so let's give Trump 5 more days. That's right, 5 more days. That's what Roy Blunt said on November 8th. And Dana Bash should have had someone from CNN should have asked Roy Blunt, because, CNN said this was an exclusive interview with Missouri Governor Roy Blunt. So someone from CNN should have noticed what he said 3 weeks ago that I showed on my live clip roundup. Here's Roy Blunt on November 8th saying we should give Trump 5 more days, not till January 6th. Over here.
Forward.
Let me stop you right there.
Let me say one other thing.
Okay.
Let me say one other thing. Go ahead.
Well, Senator Murkowski and Senator Romney have both. Okay, go ahead. Say your piece, and then I'll respond with my next question.
Well, they certainly have the right to do whatever they want to do. I think this is a time when the extra 5 days or so to get the process finished, to actually let the states look at the challenges in their state. This is a close election. This is closer than anybody thought. If you're the president and you look at the press projecting something, almost nothing the press projected in this election turned out to be right. There was no blue wave. If there is a mandate, the mandate is we want people to work together. There weren't great losses of Republican candidates because of President Trump, nor did President Trump get a thrashing. He actually, with Hispanic voters, with black voters, with voters
Senator,
that nobody expected to come to him,
let's talk about the facts. Let's talk about the facts right now. I mean, Senator Murkowski and Senator Romney have both acknowledged the victory, congratulated President-elect Biden. The president-elect is up by 10,000 votes in Georgia, almost 20 in Arizona, 27 in Nevada, 37,000 and climbing in Pennsylvania, far more in the other states. You're a former Secretary of State. I've spoken with Secretary of States, Democrat and Republican state officials over the last several days. They've said they've seen no widespread evidence of any kind of fraud at all. Joe Biden has won this election. Why can't you acknowledge it?
Well, what I said on Friday and what Chris Christie said just a few minutes ago on this show is it's time for the president's lawyers to present the facts, and then it's time for those facts to speak for themselves. It's going to be much easier to work toward the kind of transition we want. Look at the inauguration, which I'm going to have the honor of chairing again this time, and bringing the country together. If everybody feels like we went through a process and everybody was heard, every legal vote was counted, every illegal vote was challenged and not counted, we come to a conclusion. I think that happens pretty quickly. Almost every state within 7 to 10 days of the election goes through that entire canvas. There are always some changes. Seems unlikely that any changes could be big enough to make a difference, but this is a close election, and we need to acknowledge that. I read twice in reports this morning the Democrat blue wall has returned, the blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. The blue wall is at best a blue speed bump now. This is a competitive country. There is a message to whoever the next president is to work together. I look forward to the president dealing with this however he needs to deal with it. I thought Vice President Biden did a great job last night talking about where the country wants to head. And one way to do that is to finish this election the way it deserves to be finished.
You're chairman of the Rules Committee right now, in charge of the inauguration, as you said. Are we going to have anything like a normal inauguration given the pandemic?
So, yeah, that was Roy Blunt from 3 weeks ago, totally contradicting Roy Blunt from this morning. 3 weeks ago on November 8th, he's saying 5 days. Just give Trump 5 days to make his case. That's all we need. But now he's saying January 6th. That is the one thing that Danabash should have cross-examined Roy Blunt on, did not do it. And now, if you look at the, let's see, the, what do I have here? The neighboring state of Arkansas, that was Roy Blunt of Missouri. I actually lived in Missouri for like 5 years, and I don't know if anyone knows anything about the state of Missouri. I think during the pandemic, a lot of people have watched the show Ozark. I actually spent some time at the Lake of the Ozarks, which is where Ozark takes place. And I think that's kind of the transitional space between Missouri and Arkansas. The Ozarks are kind of right near the Missouri-Arkansas border, and I don't know why that transitional space didn't allow Roy Blunt, the senator from Missouri, to give a better answer than Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, gave. And he gave like a much, much better answer in terms of President-elect Biden and how he is going to be the next president on January 20th, when he was talking to Bret Baier, the guest host of Fox News Sunday this morning, in the final news clip I will talk with you about after we watch it together over here.
I want to turn for a minute to the election. President Trump, Governor, as you know, has not conceded the election. He continues to say that it was stolen. Computer experts within his own administration have pushed back on that. Take a listen.
There has been so much fraud that we have uncovered as a campaign. And listen, people need to know going forward, it's not just about right now. We need to know that every election we hold in the United States of America is fair and legal, and every legitimate vote gets counted.
It was the most secure in American history. There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes or changed votes or was in any way compromised.
Yeah, I stand by that. The American people should have 100% confidence in their vote.
So, Governor, have you seen anything that suggests that there is evidence that the president could prevail in overturning the election that has already been certified in a number of key states?
Most importantly, the courts have not seen any evidence of such extensive fraud that they have to change a result. Scores of courts have looked at that, and so that's why the General Services Administration recognized Vice President Biden as president-elect. He is president-elect. We need to work in that transition. I applaud President Trump for initiating that transition and making sure that that is happening. The worst thing that could happen is that we do not have a smooth handoff when it comes to our vaccine distribution plans, our warp speed, and that takes that transition to start now, and I'm grateful that it has. But I do think whenever you look at the elections, it would be good after the fact that we have a bipartisan review as to what's best practices, because this is going to come up again as to how to handle absentee votes, what's the best way to protect the integrity of those votes, to give people confidence. And that's not to say everything was fraudulent on this election. It just says that we need to learn from each other, all the 50 states, and to what we have done and how we can do it better, and to give people confidence that is so important in our democracy.
So you think the president should officially concede?
Well, I understand the legal reason why he should not, because he has some appeals that are going. So I recognize that. But beyond that, it's President-elect Biden. We're working with the transition. That is where we are. We expect him to be sworn in January, even though there's going to be some continued reviews, which I respect. And it's not that important. The transition is what is important. The words of President Trump are not quite as significant, but the actions are important in helping in this transition to make sure that President-elect Biden is ready to go on January 20th.
Governor Hutchinson, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
So yeah, that was a much better answer from the Republican governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, looking for a bipartisan investigation into election problems, which who could disagree with that? Our elections seem to be totally screwed up in terms of how it is we report, and how there are partisan officials who can roadblock the certifications and the Electoral College. And, well, I mean, I probably have a very different view of how our elections are screwed up than Asa Hutchinson does, but who could disagree with that part? But he does say that Biden is president-elect, but he leaves like this weird conspiracy theory loophole. We have to keep reviewing, keep reviewing what happened for the right-wing crazies who he still wants to get votes from. But anyway, that's the last of the news clips I want to show you. I do have a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the Dandy or Dash and Sandy fans out there. Dash the cat, Sandy the dog. I started the show a little early this week. I was still looking at the Super Chat contributions along the way after I told my Portuguese sardine story. I saw Tom Trask thank me. I saw Grizzy Bear say, "Let the sardines rain." And then Matthew asked me my favorite Grateful Dead song. Matthew's favorite song is Tennessee Jed, and I don't know, I'm too mainstream in my Grateful. I have a lot of songs from the Grateful Dead I like, but my favorite, you're not gonna like it, Casey Jones. It's like, my favorite band is the Talking Heads, and I kind of hate the Talking Heads fans who think Burning Down the House is the best Talking Heads song because it's the most popular one. But I like a lot of Grateful Dead songs, but I'm gonna have to say Casey Jones. It's my favorite Grateful Dead song. Sorry about that, Matthew. But finishing up the show, I have to show the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. Because I did the show early, I had to create this one with like 5 pieces of dog food. I got Dash and Sandy over to the feeding area. I think Sandy the dog might be deaf because you'll hear it's really loud. I dropped the dog food in the dog bowl. Sandy doesn't even seem to hear it. But I end up feeding Dash out of my hand. Sandy gets gets her dog food in the final Dash and Sandy clip to finish the show over here. you see how Sandy did not hear me putting the dog food in the dog bowl until I like pushed Sandy in there so that she finally pushed Dash out of the way? I think Sandy might be deaf. I don't know. Anyway, that is a cliffhanger for the next episode of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. I hope you appreciated the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. I hope you appreciated all the other newsmaker and news summary clips I picked out for you, my commentary and criticism. I will be back next week and every week at least through Sunday, January 24th, 2021, which is the Sunday after President-elect Joe Biden will be sworn in as president. Maybe I will have reason to upload other live streams or edited, produced videos between now and then, but until then, or until next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.